Now, as luck would have it, it does seem like this was planned, but it really wasn't. But as luck would have it, Andrew Eborn is here as a barrister and broadcaster. And in fact, we're going to be talking about animal testing. That's why we invited Andrew in. But it would be remiss of me, Andrew, if I didn't question you about this, because lawyers in Scotland are set to boycott these juryless rape trials. Andrew, good evening. Good to see you.
It's always good to see you, Petrie, and such a delight, such heavyweight subjects, which what I like to do is we unpack it, which is really helpful in a very consumer-friendly way, which is great.
It's great because as a barrister, there must be, in some cases, it would be a lot easier to get rid of juries, right? Just be easier.
I absolutely agree, and you highlighted exactly those sort of things. The general system at the moment is that the judge is there to tell people what the law is, and the jury is there to decide the facts based on the evidence. And that rather weird system about guilty, and not proven is a bit of a nonsense. And I'll tell you why, is that everybody's innocent until proven guilty. And it's up to the prosecution to prove guilt, not for the defendant to prove they're innocent. So not proven basically means you're not guilty. So to have that sort of middle ground seems a bit of a nonsense to me.
It seems like a cop-out, doesn't it? Just to say, well, there's, I don't know, basically.
But it is totally a cop-out. And the other point that you made in your brilliant introduction to spark the debate is about people knowing about previous convictions. And you're absolutely right. That would, in the majority of cases, say, well, if they've done it before, they've probably done it this time. And that would be unfair on the defendant. You need to try the particular cases on the facts for the particular alleged crime at that time.
So the thing is, though, that if this pilot does go ahead, right, the judges will have that information in front of them, as magistrates' courts do now, right? So they know what the person has done before. And on the balance of probability, it would be reasonable to say, well, look, he's done it before, he's a wrong un. He probably did do that this time.
Firstly,
but is that unsafe?
Well, I two issues on that. Firstly, the test for criminal cases has got to be beyond reasonable doubt. You have to basically be sure. The balance of probabilities is in civil cases, and we'll come on to this when we talk about Trump, because that was a civil case. So what happens is actually judges are very good at determining, saying, we have to do this according to the law. They know that it's up to the prosecution to prove that this particular defendant did the crime for which they're being tried at that particular moment. What tends to happen in very difficult cases involving a lot of evidence, such as fraud cases, which in some instances can go on for months and months and months, it's very easy for a lay jury to get confused. And confused juries tend to acquit as a general sort of proposition. So that seems to be the case. I'm also, as you know, a barrister, and to your point about the best mouthpiece can actually have a big influence on the court. And I have very strong views about that sort of side. As a baby barrister, you get all sorts of cases, some of which basically they say you're never going to be able to win this one, so it doesn't matter if you mess up. The reality is I never lost a case. And whether that's right or wrong, that just is a sort of general principle. So I have pretty strong views about what's a sort of fair system. But the whole idea about justice is it not just should be done, but it should be seen to be done. And that's the sort of fundamental human right, if you like.
Do you think that, 80%, as I said, of trials already in Scotland are carried out without a jury. Do you think that this is just the way it's going to go? That we will have juryless trials anyway?
Well, it's even better than that. As you know, I'm an advocate for AI and the advances of technology and robotics and things like that. The master of the roles, a wonderful chap called Sir Geoffrey Voss, he's a big advocate of embracing technology. And he actually thinks that AI could replace a number of lawyers in deciding cases. And it tends to be about sort of looking at precedents and basically digesting a huge amount of evidence on that sort of basis. It will never necessarily defeat a lawyer where you're dealing with human interaction, where you've got nuances about evidence and so on and so forth.
I mean, that's the thing with rape cases, isn't it? The rape cases are incredibly difficult to prove because of a lack of actual evidence.
Well, it is, and it's really, really hard, and it is so sad when you hear the statistics about what's happening. And as I say, with the Trump case today, you talk about all the people who are reluctant to come forward because of the agony they have to go through in court and the very, very low conviction rates. But the reality is that we're always, as lawyers, looking at ways that you can make the justice system as fair as possible. And we always say it's much better that 99 guilty people get off than one innocent person is convicted.
Yeah, see, the public is turning against that view. But yeah, let's just briefly mention Trump, because I do want to get on to the main reason that we booked you tonight. So Trump now, in the court, a civil court, he is a convicted sexual abuser.
Yeah, so what happened, the court has decided, the jury's decided that Donald Trump sexually abused and defamed the writer E. Jean Carroll, according to a New York jury. It was a civil case, so it's very important to emphasize the difference for that. So the standard of proof is not as high as in a criminal case. So Donald Trump does not become a criminal as a result of it. He has made it clear, and he's tweeted on all his sort of social media platforms, that he's going to appeal this. But basically, he was cleared of rape, and it's to do with an alleged assault in a department store in the 1990s. Trump himself didn't testify, but the jury, which was made up of 6 men and 3 women, was shown a video deposition where he basically denied the rape. And that's what happened. And huge damages have been awarded in the first instance, to have a look at that sort of side. And I think it's very important to put that into perspective when you're looking at these sort of things and saying, OK, what's happened here? This is what the reality is. It's a civil case, and he's lost that civil case in the first instance.
Presumably,
he will appeal.
If he can't pay the $5 million, though, then that does become a criminal act.
Well, there's a different sort of thing about enforcement of judgments and so on and so forth. And it's rather similar to people saying about the license fee. It's not a criminal offence not to pay the license fee. It's a criminal offence not to pay the fine. Yeah. So it is that sort of difference, but it's good to highlight that in a slightly different case.
Right. Andrew, this story really got my imagination going today, because I just don't think the public know about it.
Yeah.
Animal testing for makeup in this country is to resume. Now, we thought this was done, particularly for makeup. It was banned in 1998, but rather quietly, animal testing for makeup has started up again.
Well, it's not quite the headline. It's not quite that. And this is why there is confusion, because there's a difference between testing for makeup and testing for the chemicals that go into that makeup. And it's the latter, the chemicals, that are being allowed to be tested. But basically, the headline is the government's allowed animal testing for makeup ingredients to resume despite a 25-year ban. And what happened, there was a high court ruling about EU chemicals, if you like. Now, animal testing, as you say, for makeup or its ingredients has been completely banned in the UK since 1998. And it's only been allowed before then if benefits gained from the research outweighed any animal suffering, for example, for medicines. Now, in 2020, the European Chemicals Agency, the ECHA, which is an EU agency, it oversees chemical regulations. And what it says, you can do some tests on some of the ingredients used in these bits of makeup, and you can do those tests on animals to ensure that they're safe for workers manufacturing the ingredients. And that's why it's a bit of a sort of blurred line, if you like, where the media have got slightly the wrong sort of thing. You cannot do testing of makeup on animals. That is still banned. It's about the chemicals that go into that makeup, which they say you can test.
But that is so nuanced, isn't it? Again, basically they're testing makeup on animals. Will we know? Do we have a right to know? For example, I would not buy a product that any component of which was tested on an animal, unless, obviously, like, I'm not ridiculous, medicines and things like that, which we know is an ongoing thing. But do we have a right to know which?
I think, as the general public, we should know, and I think we should demand what happens. But it's across the industry. So if it's a particular chemical which is used in all makeup brands,
right,
you've got a problem, because that particular chemical would have been tested on animals. So if the relevant manufacturers of makeup are really cute about this, they should be advertising now that none of the chemicals, none of the makeup, avoid that sort of clarity or lack of clarity, and deal with it on that sort of basis. It is a PR disaster
It really, it genuinely is, isn't it? Because I mean, I remember when makeup was first banned in terms of being tested on animals, and you couldn't move for things with that printed on, not tested on animals. No, you know, shampoos and all of those kind of things. We knew what was going on, but I wonder if you say, like, if it's in every single piece of makeup, how are they going to let us know?
That's exactly the problem. So I think the trouble with the headlines, what I love about your show is you unpack it so people understand what's happening. Makeup itself cannot be tested on animals. It's the chemicals that go into that makeup. That's the key. So you have to ask yourself, what chemicals are in that, and have those chemicals been tested on animals? The question then is, are there companies that are not using those chemicals? And if I were those companies, I'd be trumpeting that from the roof.
Yeah, me too, because that's exactly where I'd switch my allegiance. Fascinating. Andrew, thank you for dealing with 3 topics instead of just the one. You're absolutely brilliant. Andrew Eborn there, barrister and broadcaster. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Stay with me, though, now, because we are going on to talk to Phil Dave about tech news. What's happening?